back. I've been wanting to get a video out here for going on a month now, and wanted to get some projects done versus talking about getting projects done. So this week's been devoted to bringing the block controller up to snuff. This particular version is a DAC controlled buck converter, and for those of you that don't know what that is, a DAC is basically an acronym. DAC is an acronym for digital to analog converter. So we're controlling a buck converter, which is essentially a DC to DC converter. I have 24 volts. Let's see if I can find it here. I have one of these adjustable power supplies. It's 9 to 24 volts, so it says roughly 24 and a half. Whether to believe that or not, I don't know. So by the time it gets to the rails, it's usually about a volt and a half lower than that. So let's say 23 volts to the rails. Most of these, if not all of these buck converters, have a little adjustment pot, a potentiometer, if you will, that allows you to fine tune the voltage. It's generally a multi-turn where, it can be 10 or 20 turns and gives you a very fine control. The idea is to replace that multi-turn potentiometer with some sort of external control device. Started out by using just an external potentiometer on the front panel, and found out very quickly that the entire range, it's for this particular buck converter, this 2596, it'll do up to 3 amps. It had a 10k ohm pot on there. I replaced that with an external one with just a single rotation. I replaced that with an external 10k pot that basically went to about 6.5k before it stopped making any difference. So then the idea was, put a resistive divider in there, put a minimum, whatever. So let's try a 5k and some kind of minimum, but I gave up on that fairly quickly. My idea was to use a digital control to inject a control current into that part of the DC to DC converter adjustment, the buck converter adjustment. And I found an application note for Maxim online that described 3 different circuits, one of which was using a digital analog converter, a DAC. Another one was using a digital potentiometer, digital pot, which I have a number of ancient ones from 20-30 years ago. I had hoped to use those and kind of let myself get wrapped around the axle of, I needed a high voltage one, and all these were rated at 5 volts. And so the circuit that Maxim showed was in the low side of the adjustment, and it would have taken some more doing to find the low part of the adjustment. So just a voltage divider from the output back to the input to adjust and regulate the output. I would have had to found that that little chip resistor on the board and unsoldered it, or somehow managed to replace it or overcome it, if you will, if I didn't replace it or remove it. So I kind of stuck with the DAC version, which lets me digitally control using the Arduino down here, and behind this analog to digital converter is the digital to analog converter back there. I don't know if you can see the bright red LED. Everything in here has an LED. So here, just a quick, let me see if I can do this without breaking anything. I'll change the direction. You can see the light lights up, and the relays are in the opposite, in the reverse direction. Now they're in the forward direction. You see the blue LED saying I push the button. That's this version. Now, I found that the 2596 was kind of at the hairy edge of what it could control. And out on the railroad, what I found was out on the railroad, running the power hungry GP9 along with the switcher and a 10-wheeler, or I call them doodle bugs, but they're not. they're egg liners. We call them doodle bugs because we got the ladybug and the bumblebee. So we found out that even though it was able to supply the current, the voltage dropped to, I think it was 12 or 13 volts if I remember right. I'll see if I can find the old video, it might show. What I did was I came up with a new version that uses, let me see if I can get this in the frame. A different DC to DC converter. This one's a 4015 based that'll go up to 5 amps, 4 amps, 5 amps, somewhere around there. And there's a 4016 version that'll do 8 amps with it'll do 5 amps easily, and it'll do 8 amps with a heat sink. Well, one of these little doodads here that it's got the everything has a double-sided sticky nowadays. But yeah, you just peel that off and stick it on the control chip. And if you can see it down there, it's right about there. And I can put my finger on that. That's, even with it running, it doesn't get that warm. So I'm not real concerned about putting a heat sink on there. Now, if I'm running 8 amps, I might think about it. Let's move on. So oh, looky there. I forgot I had those there. So yeah, these were some 3D prints that I did that it was practice for the, here, hold on a second, let me get it. All right, those letters were practice for, you've seen it at the start of of just about every video here. Yeah, what I did was 3D printed some overlays. So if you're wondering, the original Lionel thing is still under there. You can still see, kind of the RO, the CRO from crossing, but I just replaced that with Barkyard. So anyway, and that's part of what I was doing the week before last was projects with 3D printing, and the idea was to replace the clay-fired bricks that were in front of the station platform. So here's one of the ones that I printed just for testing, and it's supposed to be stone block. Here, hold on one second. All right, sorry about that. So here's the original, and I printed it in black, thinking, it's going to be like the dark cut stone that I grew up with in Ohio along the Pennsylvania Railroad right away. And all their retaining walls and arches and culverts use the same cut stone approach. So, with these, the idea is now I can put a pair of these together. Well, they're trying to escape me, but I found one. So the idea is you would have just a row of those blocks to fill in the empty holes, and that would snap on there. Now I've already filed some of these down. Obviously I have some work to do here to get these to be a kind of a snap fit, not a press fit. But you get the idea there. Let's see. Yeah. To where, yeah, you would join a bunch of these sections together. And then when you came to the end, you'd have an end. Well, put it on the proper end. You'd have an end effect there that would let you go to an end cap or around the corner, if you will. This would be like a right angle in any case, I got to the point where I was trying to figure out how to do the piece that goes in here for casting concrete. The idea is these are going to be not positives but negatives, to where they would be a mold that you could cast the concrete into and would take on that shape. You can color the concrete either as you mixed it, or do a powder coat on the face of it. I haven't really decided which way to go yet. That's the whole idea here, is experiment. So these were meant to simulate an 8-foot diameter arch, and the way that the design showed was it stopped short of doing a full circle. So this is about, well, doing it at 1:24 scale, 8 foot ends up being 4 inches. So the opening here would be 4 inches, but that's not quite, because they stop short here on these shoulders, to where you've got a load-bearing wall here, or at least a seat for the arch that would bear the weight. Now that leaves this opening at 3.5 inches, and the entire width of this, right down the middle of one of these, right along those edges to these edges, is 7 inches. So that's about 14 foot. Now I was shooting for 15 foot, which would have been 7.5, but it was, I'd end up with a half block off, and it was just easier to do it this way. I was trying to design some kind of a piece that filled in here, and then it would be printed. And once it was printed, while it was still warm, would be wrapped into this arch shape. So hopefully this makes sense. So rather than going through all those complicated, print a bunch of pieces, takes days, you have to glue it all together, my thoughts were, let's take a piece of PVC pipe which can just rough in the shape, and you can see there's a little bit of slop there. So I redesigned it to where it would fit, to where this arch was a 7-foot diameter instead of an 8-foot, and it actually came down to where it was a semicircle. And I guess using a bit of creative license, but now you can see where I've marked on here where I can just slice a piece of 3-inch PVC in half and have 2 arch sections, cut it to length for whatever I need for the width of the arch section. And now, so essentially here, let me see if I can set this up and still have the camera see it. See what I'm talking about. Yeah, because I can't pick things up. There we go. Alright, so here's the idea. You would have something like this. Now granted, it wouldn't be that narrow. It would be however wide you needed for the track. But you'd have these 2 face pieces that would be the only parts that needed printed, that gave you the impression. And then underneath there, well, if you want to get right down on the patio, lay your head on the paver stones and look under there and see if it shows brick detail or not. You be my guest, but I'm going to go with it's a lot easier to cut some PVC pipe and some 1x4s to size and cast it. That leaves us with the option of casting in place, just rough without any detail, and then later casting just a face, kind of like what we did with the downtown storefront apartment buildings. Or perhaps print the mold piece and line the inside of the 1x4 that, on the side that you'll see with that, and have the details molded into the concrete and do it all in one shot. And again, until I get back to that, not really sure what we're going to find. I know one thing: we can't leave it torn up for any length of time or formed up for any length of time, or the dogs will plow it, and next thing you know, you have concrete everywhere. Yeah. So I guess so along those lines, we'll have to plan accordingly how to protect this and make this off limits. In the past, we've tried everything, and literally nothing keeps the dogs out of where they want to go. And I'll just leave it at that. So, what else can I tell you? What other projects? Doing some more organization in the office here, doing some more organization in the garage so that I can get back to having a casting bench and a trestle bench. After 5 years out in the elements and being battered by the dogs on a daily basis, our How Truss bridge is in pretty sad shape. And I'm not going to say it needs rebuilt, but it needs a lot of TLC. And probably the quickest way to do that and still run trains, I should say, would be to build a new bridge and replace that one. To replace that one, we want to redesign the way that that bridge works and not have two parallel runs come up to the end of a loop and then do an obvious loop back and then exit the loop and then go back the other. The idea is to run, and I don't know if I'll be able to put some visual aids in here at some point or not. I've been trying to design that too, along with the 3D printing, and like I say, all that got put on the back burner from last week, so I could spend this week working on the electronics. And the idea there was, while all the updates that I made to the passenger car lighting were fresh in my mind, I would go ahead and move all that over to the block controller. And of course, I got into one of those while I'm in here rabbit holes and decided to redesign, or in this case refactor, the code to pull all the pieces that talk to, like the analog to digital converter, or the digital to analog converter, you name it. The encoder button. So let me show you that while we're talking about it. So on the front side of this, it's probably going to be easier just to lay this down like this or stand it up like that. So of course, as soon as I touch it, I see my monitor flash that the current sensor all of a sudden had some noise and went out of the range it had found. But this here is an encoder knob. So here's the idea: you push it and it changes. I think you heard the relay changes direction. Push it again, direction changes. You can, and because you can see the voltage on the output coming up and going down. And of course there's no current because there's nothing connected to it. And the reason there's a voltage across it to begin with is we're actually measuring the drop across all the circuitry. So without something to load the output, I think is the best way to put that. There's no way, because there's no current flowing, there's no way to drop that voltage all the way to zero. Otherwise, that would read zero. But I think you can see that's it's all digital. With it being all digital, I can make a change here and it shows up on the screen. And if I make a change on the screen, then it would effectively show up here. There's no other display other than the meters on the front, but you would see that if I was remote controlling either one of these, you would see the meters, the analog panel meters, change to whatever the setting was requested on the web interface. Sorry, I was distracted by the microphone picking up my discs, once again getting scrubbed by Windows. Thanks, Microsoft. Oh yeah, along those lines, my one of the reasons why I had to switch from drawing up or drafting up the design for the 3D printing was my birthday present from Microsoft was to update my video drivers with some older version of NVIDIA that I don't know how they came up with it, but I've already, I'm running. So I think they replaced whatever it was with 471.11. And, I spent a day or two trying to track down why once the monitors would go to sleep and go into low power, turn off, and then you move your mouse or whatever, and normally then they light back up. Well, the machine would crash when you tried to wake the monitors back up, which was really annoying because now I couldn't do anything. And, I wasn't wanting to shut the machine down that had been up and running since last year sometime. But I had to because, if it doesn't work, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on again? Enough soapboxing. So long story short, I had already installed the NVIDIA Game Ready drivers, and there's not the control panel. Now we'll have to wait for the doggy to stop. Okay. Oh, we'll have to wait for the mailman to move on down the road because, yeah. Thanks, Maya. The one thing is his older sister is no longer with us, passed on. One of her bad habits, he just... And, of course, now Rocket does it, so I guess it's... it's just... Yeah, normally you'd get upset, but it's just funny anymore. Thinking about it, it's like, thanks, Maya. Hey, I'm not going to yell and... I do wish he'd stop so I could finish the video, though. Now Rocket's going to join in. I'm going to have to yell, hang on. All right, boys, I know. Mailman's gone. Give me a minute and we'll go out and play. You want to go out and play? Go wait by the door. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up. I already made a promise I can't keep unless I get out of here soon. And there's the woof. There's the come on. Oh. So, I already have the GeForce experience installed in the Game Ready drivers, and I built this machine going on 10 years ago as a gaming machine. And I did some gaming, but this thing is still going strong, and the only upgrade that I've had to make to it is I had the old GeForce 550 that wasn't cutting it for doing the video processing. Nick had a GeForce 750 sitting there. Nick had a GeForce 750 just sitting there doing, collecting dust, doing nothing, and offered that to me. So I installed that, got all the latest and greatest in there. And the nice thing is NVIDIA really goes the extra mile and finds all the apps that require a GPU, the graphics processing unit, and says, do you want to optimize for our hardware? And sure, click it, and there you go. Now, why Microsoft felt it necessary to go in there and screw that all up, I don't know. If you made it this far, thanks for watching, and we'll keep you up to date on what we're up to. This isn't really the type of project video that lends itself to a series, part 1 through whatever. We will have those. I will be getting back to this, and we'll have some outdoor footage while we're doing the casting and a bunch of things coming up. But for now, this is just here's what we're up to. Here's what we've been up to. Here's the direction we're going. And just to keep you in the loop, if you will. So again, thanks for watching, and we'll be back. And we'll be back. And Rocket's going to whine every time I say that. And we'll be back. There's one without.